And good afternoon. Welcome to the booth with Darren Todd on KDX AM 1590. I'm very excited about my next guest, a member of the Missouri Tourism Hall of Fame. He's very modest. He didn't want me to know that, but I know a lot about Gary that he doesn't want me to put on the air. But we've been friends for a long time. He is the editor, publisher, and founder of Show Me Missouri, a travel magazine in Missouri. Gary, welcome to the booth.
Well, thank you for having me, Darren. Enjoy being here, and been enjoying listening to the shows, and so thanks for inviting me.
Well, first of all, Gary, a lot of people in the area know you, but just for those who don't, give us a little information about Gary Figgins.
Well, I grew up in Caruthersville, and I graduated from Caruthersville High School. Started working the newspaper over there when I was in high school. Went to college and continued at the paper during college, and ended up at the paper and stayed there about 10 years, a little less than 10 years, and then left by no choice of my own. But yeah, one of those good things that happen to you in the long run, and started a printing business, print brokerage business. And from that, that kind of launched into the magazine business, and started the magazine in 1998. First issue came out in winter 1998, and we celebrated our 25th anniversary year before last.
And again, we're here and welcome to the booth with Darren Todd on KDX AM 1590, talking to Gary Figgins, the founder, publisher, and editor of Show Me Missouri, the travel magazine of Missouri. And Gary, you indicated at one point a lot of these smaller towns had their own newspaper, Malden, Kennett, Crothersville, things of that nature. What was the name of the paper over in Crothersville that you worked at?
At the paper, when I was there, we actually had three papers. We were 3 times a week, and each paper had a different name, but it ran as a 3 times a week paper. The Democrat Argus, the Pembscott Journal, and then the Missouri Herald. We bought out, while I was at the paper, the Crothersville paper bought out the Missouri Herald in Hayti. And interestingly, the papers at that time were owned by Ward Archer, who also owned the Memphis Business Journal. In fact, when the Memphis Business Journal first launched, it was printed in Caruthersville.
Oh, absolutely. I did not know that.
Yeah, so he sold it to, that kind of really started this idea of big companies buying the small town papers. He was an individual private owner. He sold it to American Publishing. American Publishing ran it for a little bit. They eventually sold it to Russ, and I guess Russ owns everything in southeast Missouri, pretty much. Maybe there may be a few exceptions, but small town paper. It was that was my dream job. I came out of high school. When I graduated from high school, the night before graduation, we went to a friend's house. We had our senior party, and the father of the girl who was hosting the party, he put us all on videotape. What do you plan on doing? In 15, 20 years, when you come to our 20-year reunion, we're going to show this tape. And I said, I want to be a newspaper owner or magazine owner, publisher, or something like that. And 20 years later, I was.
And again, we're here and welcome to the booth with Darren Todd on KDX AM 1590, talking to my good friend Gary Figgins, the founder, owner, publisher, editor of the Show Me Missouri, the travel magazine in Missouri. Gary, you indicated you were at the paper there for 10 years. You left, and you indicated that you were a broker?
Yeah, I was print broker. Going back to the newspaper business, that was something I really wanted to do. Small towns need their newspapers, and they've gone through a lot of changes over the past 30, 40 years, and some of them unfortunate, and some of them just necessary because of the economic times. But I always thought that was a noble profession. I still think it's a noble profession. I think small towns need to know what's going on, and you have local radio programs and like this one, and your small town newspapers, and they cover the business that you don't get in the social media. They kind of put facts to the social media that we all kind of grow tired of listening to, and now starting to question whether it's true or not. So when I left the paper, I started a print brokerage business, and what that was, I went around to companies. I would make agreements with printing companies, and I would know what their schedules were as far as their downtime on the presses. So I would go into another company and say, okay, give them a bid on printing. And these were major publishers, one of them I still have is a accounting firm in Memphis, and it's the 6th largest accounting firm in Memphis, I believe. But anyway, when they print massive amounts of printed goods. And so they would contract with me, and then I would schedule their printing on other presses, and they could get better prices than they could just purchasing from a local printer there in Memphis. So I did that for about 7 years, and then the magazine kind of launched from that. I had published a magazine for Penobscot County for the county chamber at the time. At that time, Penobscot County had a chamber of commerce, and then I did one for New Madrid Chamber, and it was more of a quality of life publication, just things going on in that community, and then the chamber or whoever it was, economic development office, whatever, could use that as a collateral piece when they're going out talking to industry or new business or whatever. And the New Madrid piece was seen by a friend who was a former newspaper publisher, who at the time was the chair of the Missouri Tourism Commission. And he saw and he called and said, Missouri does not have a travel magazine. At that time, they did not have a travel magazine. And he said, if you would consider doing something like that, I would introduce you to all the people you need to know. I would make some recommendations and, kind of help you out as best as I could. And so I looked into it, spent about 2 years doing research on it, talked to publishers of other travel magazines in other states, Mississippi, Arkansas, Tennessee, Arizona. Arizona Highways was one of the big publications at that time, and still a fantastic publication. And spent about 2 years, put the first issue together. I shared an office. At that time, I had moved my office here to Kennett. When I got married in 95, I married a Kennett girl. Moved to Kennett in 95, but I kept my office in Caruthersville until 97, I guess. And when I moved over here, I shared an office with our office building with Jack Stapleton, who was the former publisher of the newspaper here, but he was still very connected in politics. And in fact, he had a newsletter. He wrote political columns for newspapers that were syndicated in Missouri, but he also had a political newsletter that I guess every state politician, anyone with any inkling of being in politics in Missouri, they subscribed to that newsletter. And I mean, he was just that connected. And I mentioned to him that we were going to be putting together the first issue, and I'd really like to have a unique cover story for that first issue. It was going to be a Christmas issue. It was coming out in November, and so it would be over the Christmas season. And he said, let me work on something here. Let me make some calls for you. And about 30 minutes later, he walked across the hall and opened my door and said, hey, you're going to get a call from the governor's office here in a minute. And I said, governor's office? And he said, yeah. I said, First Lady Jean Carnahan is going to write a column, is going to write a story about Christmas in the governor's mansion.
Oh, interesting.
And so the very first cover feature was a story written by Jean Carnahan talking about focusing on, everyone has this idea we go home. We have this image of going home for Christmas. Well, the first family doesn't go home for Christmas. They have Christmas in a borrowed house. And so her story was about having Christmas in a borrowed house and all of her kids and her grandkids coming into, this borrowed home and making it their home for the 8 years that they were there. Mm. And this would have been the last year that they were in the next to the last year that they were in the governor's mansion. Before he had already announced, I guess he'd already announced he was running for Senate.
Correct.
Governor Carnahan. And, of course, he died in plane crash during the campaign of 2000.
And again, here on Welcome to the Booth with Darren Todd on KDX AM 1590, talking to Gary Figgins, the founder, editor, publisher of Show Me Missouri, the travel magazine in Missouri. And Gary, you're talking a little bit about Jack Stapleton. Jack Stapleton's daughter, is it Sally?
Sally Stapleton.
Sally Stapleton is a award-winning photographer. Is that correct?
Yeah, she was Pulitzer-winning photographer. She was in charge of the AP or UPI and AP, I guess, photo teams, and she won Pulitzer. Her team won Pulitzer for some photos out during the Rwanda genocide back in the mid-'90s. And in fact, she was in town. She comes back to town still occasionally, but last year Kennett hosted the Missouri Photojournalism Workshop.
Right.
Photo workshop that was run by the Missouri Photojournalism School. and she was one of the team of judges, one of the advisors. And so she came back. I had a good time visiting with her about her dad and her work as a photographer, and just how she's able to influence these younger photographers coming up, and even some of the older photographers that are professional photographers in the news industry.
And again, we're here on Welcome to the Booth with Darren Todd on KDX AM 1590, talking to Gary Figgins, the founder, publisher, and editor of Show Me Missouri, the travel magazine in Missouri. And Gary, you're talking a little bit about the event that happened a year ago, and I forget the exact name was.
It was the Missouri Photo Workshop.
And the reason why I know a lot about it is I went and saw the work of the photographers. And in fact, my son-in-law, Matt Chandler, and his family were also featured in that. Tell the listeners a little bit about what that is.
What that was, this started, I think this was the 56th year of the workshop. It was started by the director of the photojournalism school at Mizzou back in the 50s, 60s, whenever it was. And the idea was to document life in rural America, really document life in rural Missouri, but in essence, also rural America. And the photographers come in, they select 40 photographers each year, and they come in on a Sunday, or last year when they came in on a Sunday. Pete, we had hosted a dinner. The Chamber of Commerce hosted a kind of a little reception, and people could come in and pitch stories to the photographers. The photographers are responsible for coming up with their own stories. Now, people can help them with their stories, but they come up with a story, and then they have to figure out a way to tell that story in 10 photos or less. And so they come in, they grab their story idea, and then for the next 4 or 5 days, they work on trying to document that story in 10 photos. And they have only, because now in 1988, they were in Carruthersville, and that's the only other time that they have been in the Boot Hill. And I was at the newspaper at that time. And so since I was at the paper, they let me sit in on their nightly critique sessions. And those are some pretty tough sessions. I mean, you see adults who are used to, going out in the field and taking the photos, and now you've got, photo editors from newspapers all across the country and photojournalism schools all across the country, just really kind of tearing their work apart and telling them how they could do better. But it's all to build a better photographer, a better storyteller. And the whole idea of the workshop is to teach photographers to look beyond the photo. Don't just click the continuous shutter on your camera. Look and really dig into the photo and what are you seeing that tells the story of this person? There were some fantastic stories from Kent. The Chandler family was one on Mr. Lynn, who recently passed away. It's just, some great, you just look at those images and you see their life stories in just one photo. And when they were in 88, when they were in Carruthersville, of course, we were film. So you were limited to, I think they were limited to 10 rolls of film. Well, because everything's digital now, they were limited to 400 photos. They could only click the camera 400 times. And I listened one night, one of the photographers was telling a funny story. He was following a family, and they had a young child, and he had set his camera down to, talk or something, and he looked over, and this child was snapping pictures. That went against his credit. And so he lost like 3 or 4 images because that child grabbed the camera, but that's how serious they are about it. And then from that, they have to select their 10 photos that were displayed on the final day of the workshop. And here in Kennett, it was at the fire station during the Delta Fair.
And again, we're here with Welcome to the Booth with Darren Todd on KDX AM 1590, talking to Gary Figgins, the founder, editor, publisher of Show Me Missouri, the Missouri travel magazine in Missouri, talking a little bit about the photojournalism expose that was last year. And you indicated there was 40 photographers, is that correct?
There were 40 photographers.
And I think what individuals and the listeners need to know, it wasn't 40 photographers from Missouri.
No.
They were from all over the world.
They were from all over the country. In fact, there were 4 that were from other countries. And the staff members, the mentors, the team leaders that were here, there was a staff, there were 40 photographers, and then there were 20 faculty members. And these were some of the top photo editors at newspapers like the San Francisco Chronicle, and I think there were some papers in Missouri as well. But I mean, major newspapers, major journalism schools, and they were here in Kennett for 7 days, and they lived in Kennett for 7 days, and they saw life here. And it just so happened that the workshop was during the Delta Fair, so that was something that really excited the photographers, because it gave them a lot of opportunities, and most of the subjects went to the fair, so they were able to capture their subjects at the fair and kind of that fair atmosphere, and it was just a great time. And in fact, the first night they arrived, they were headquartered at the First Baptist Church's Family Life Center, and that was kind of their headquarters. So they would meet there, and then during the morning, they would go out, photograph their subjects. They would come in during the day. They'd turn in their cameras, their cards from their cameras. And then at night, there would be a session where the faculty selected the best photos, or selected photos they thought they could do a little something extra with. And they would have these 2-hour, 3-hour review sessions on the photos, and the photographers would take off the next day and try to use what they learned that night. But the first night they were there, I went out to check on them, and there were probably a dozen photographers out in the cotton field right across the highway from the church. They'd never seen cotton.
Right.
And that's something we take for granted around here. It's just, we look at it and we think, oh, well, it's cotton season, or we smell the defoliant and we think it's cotton season. But it fascinated them. And it gives a small town like Kennett, or this year they're in Union, Missouri, and a small town like Kennett, Union, Caruthersville, it gives these small towns a way to show off, but also see you see all the warts and wrinkles too, and sometimes that's good for a community too. You see what the outsider sees, and sometimes it's something you can address, sometimes it's something you don't want to.
Absolutely. Again, we're going to welcome to the booth, KDX AM 1590 with Darren Todd. Talking to Gary Figgins, the publisher, editor, and founder of the Show Me Missouri, the travel magazine Missouri. We're going to get to the magazine. I promise you, Gary's got a lot of interesting things. We talked a little bit about the expose. One thing that you've also done here recently, you just got back from the state fair. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was over at the state fair. Every year I'm on the board of directors of Missouri Travel Alliance, and it's kind of an umbrella organization that encompasses attractions, destination marketing organizations, cities, chambers of commerce, hotels, what have you. And I've been on that board for about 26 years, I guess. And so one day during the fair, always the first Thursday of the fair, Missouri Travel Alliance has a big expo called the Tourism and Travel Trade Show. And communities come in, mostly communities from the west side of the state come in. They set up booths, and people at the fair can come in. And we're in one of the few air-conditioned buildings on the fairgrounds, so it's a good way to escape the heat or escape the rain if it might be raining. But these communities come in, they set their booths up, and then I'm the MC in that building, and I've done that for probably 15 years or so. And so I go over there for 2 days, and it's just always an enjoyable time. It's not a fun drive from Kennett to Sedalia, but it is a fun time once you get there.
And again, we're going to welcome to the booth with Darren Todd on KDX AM 1590, talking to Gary Figgins, the publisher, editor, founder of the Show Me Missouri, the travel magazine of Missouri. Talking about the state fair, Gary, one thing I wish the state fair would do, I love Sedalia. Don't get me wrong. I love Sedalia. Could they pick a time in which it was a little hotter? What was it, 110 degrees that week you were there?
Actually, the week I was there, it was more tolerable. It was down in the 80s. The first week of the fair, though, it was just miserably hot. And, I'm not sure how that was decided, but I think it's been the same week or same 10 days ever since it started. So it's kind of like the Delta Fair here in Dunklin County. It's
or the Dexter or the Stoddard
County Fair in Dexter. Right. They're scheduled, and it's either going to be hot or it's going to be something's going to happen to make it miserable.
And again, you said you were up there for a couple days. you had the show there. You were the MC in the building. Did you have an opportunity to do anything else while you're up there at the state fair?
Yeah, we have board meetings, and so we always have the association has an executive committee board meeting, kind of a planning and retreat there, and then we go out the night of our retreat. We go to the fairgrounds and we set up, and then we go out and visit the fair and some of the booths and stuff. And big thing, we eat dinner there, and so we see the food booths here at our local county fairs, and we recognize those. But you get up to state fair and the Missouri Beef Growers Association. I mean, they have a whole restaurant on grounds that's open only during the fair. Missouri Pork Producers, they have their own restaurant. There's a fish place, and I mean, all these producers have their permanent buildings, and they just do a phenomenal business for the 10 days of the fair. And I mean, you have farm families, you have ranchers in there, and these aren't this isn't these aren't manned by restaurant staff. These are manned by volunteers, the farmers themselves, their families, their kids. A lot of times you'll sit down and some kid will bring your food to your plate. Some kid will bring food to your plate, and that kid grew up on a farm. He gets up every morning and feeds the cattle.
And, that's one thing about the state fair. And again, we're on Welcome to the Booth with Darren Todd on KDX AM 1590, talking to Gary Figgins. It's a cross reference or a cross slice of living in rural Missouri, and all of Missouri, isn't it?
Oh yeah. And it's one thing I was amazed the first time I went to the state fair. There's a campground that's on the state fairgrounds. I don't know if it's part of the fairgrounds. I guess it is, but hundreds of trailers and RVs out there, and there are people who that's their summer vacation. You and I go on a trip, some big road trip. Their summer vacation is spending it at the state fair in Sedalia, and they have their camper set up and they have their spot, and they may be a vendor, they may be a rancher, they may be showing cattle or goats or whatever. But that's their summer vacation.
And I'm going to put Gary on the spot because that's what I like to do, because he always comes up. And we indicated it's 10 days is when the state fair is. Is it always the first or second week of August?
I think it's always that first week of August. We're always there. It starts like at the end of the start of the second week of August, because our show is always the second week, the second Thursday of the month. And our show also falls on the day of the governor's ham breakfast,
which is another major political event.
Yeah, that's a huge political event, and I mean every politician in the state is there for the most part. And as in my duties with Missouri Travel Alliance, I'm also the legislative chair, and I've done that since probably 2001. And so I go to that breakfast and kind of oversee the lobbying efforts of the tourism industry in the state.
And again, here we're on Welcome to the Booth with Darren Todd on KDX AM 1590, talking to Gary Figgins, the founder, publisher, and editor of Show Me Missouri, the travel magazine in Missouri. And one other thing I can say about Gary, other than our state rep and our state senator, and depending on who it was and what year, Gary has been to Jefferson City more than possibly anybody else in all this region. Wouldn't you say that's correct?
Well, I've definitely traveled more than any non-legislator to Jeff City, so, or as much anyway.
And you indicated that some of your duties are lobbying for travel and tourism in the state of Missouri. Kind of what do you do when you go to Jefferson City? Kind of explain that process.
When we go, I go multiple times. I'll testify on behalf of bills or against bills that affect tourism industry, but the industry as a whole has a tourism day called Tourism Day at the Capitol. And so we go in February, we meet with legislators, we break off in teams, usually based on geographic locations. So all the Southeast Missouri legislators, or all the Southeast Missouri industry members, will go together and visit the legislators in Southeast Missouri, not just their own legislators. And so we kind of divide that up. We have a priority list each year, whatever it is. Usually tourism funding is always at the top of that list, but there are other issues, be it lodging taxes that are proposed. Past couple of years, the couple of bills that we've had to fight against are lodging tax bills that are proposed with the funding going to general revenue expenses. Say you want to, most lodging taxes, the ones we support are lodging taxes. Kennett has one. I don't know if Dexter has one or not. But Kennett has a lodging tax, and the funding for that is specifically earmarked for travel promotion, tourism promotion. So we have a committee that oversees the expenses from that account, and most communities do the same thing. They fund their convention and visitors bureaus. They may fund part of the Chamber of Commerce activities. Whoever the designated marketing organization is, they help fund those agencies and their marketing efforts. A lot of legislators, I say a lot, some legislators have looked at that now, and they see it as a means of passing the buck on to visitors to an area to help pay for regular expenses. You know, there may be a bill that's proposed that pass this bill, and you can take your lodging tax or a part of your lodging tax to pay for law enforcement. Well, you know, it sounds good, and you're saying, well, hey, you know, law enforcement, and we're not paying for it ourselves. Visitors are paying for it, but your hoteliers are paying for it, and it's something that they have to compete with the town next door who may not have a lodging tax. And so, for the most part, the hotels get behind these taxes if they know the money is going to be spent properly, and meaning the money will be spent to bring additional business to their businesses.
And again, we're on Welcome to the Booth with Darren Todd on KDX AM 1590, talking to Gary Figgins, the publisher, founder, and editor of Show Me Missouri, the travel magazine of Missouri. And Gary, as I listen to you, a lot of people are going to say, well, why is bringing travel and tourism so important to Missouri? How's that going to benefit me if I live in Laclede, or if I live in Lafayette, or if I live in Frisbee? How does that help me?
Last year, just for example, there were 42 million visitors who came into the state. Visitors who came into the state spent money, spent about $13 billion in spending in the state. That money generated tax revenue that helps pay for your schools. It helps pay for your roads. It helps pay for every other department. And I know every other department can say it too, that we generate revenue for each other, but that's the way state government works. The state collects money from different ways, from different areas, to put into not always the same area, but other areas as well. And those visitors stop coming to the state, then you lose that revenue that's generated from them. So it's a big benefit. And even in rural Missouri, visitors come to rural Missouri.
And again, we're here on Welcome to the Booth, KDX AM 1590. Darren Todd talking to Gary Figgins, the founder, editor, and publisher of Show Me Missouri, the travel magazine of Missouri. And Gary, I know that you've traveled extensively throughout the state of Missouri. Would you not agree that Missouri is probably one of the most interesting states in the fact that we have some outstanding outdoor activities? We have 3 or 4 major metropolitan areas that you can visit in Kansas City, Columbia, St. Louis. We also have numerous state or federal parks and things of that nature. Yeah. Missouri has got to be one of the most diverse states in America for travel and tourism.
And being from Missouri, a lot of people don't look at it that way, but it is. I mean, it's a huge draw. A lot of people wouldn't realize Missouri has a huge international draw. Route 66 is a big, especially in Europe. Route 66, for whatever reason, it's the highway that kind of displays Americana, and it's a huge destination for European travelers coming to the U.S. that they want to travel all through Route 66. And Route 66 cuts diagonally through the state from St. Louis all the way down to Joplin. There was former lieutenant governor, his name was Joe Maxwell, back in the early 2000s, and the lieutenant governor sits on the Missouri Tourism Commission. That's one of the permanent members on the Missouri Tourism Commission, is whoever the lieutenant governor is. And Joe Maxwell had a great saying. He was a speaker here at the chamber banquet back when he was in office. That would probably been somewhere around 2005 or 2006. And he had a great comment. He said, if America is the melting pot of the world, then Missouri is the melting pot of America. And he pointed to the fact that we have all these ethnic representations, from international ethnic representations. You have the Italian population, the French heritage, the Hispanic heritage, European influence. You have the Hispanic influence, and he named all these things. And he said, you can, within a 2-hour drive, and really even here in the flattest part of the state, within a 2-hour drive, you can be in the mountains. You have the mountains, you have the streams, but you also have the metropolitan areas of Kansas City and St. Louis and Springfield. I mean, Springfield's a huge city that we don't, unless you've been to Springfield, you don't realize it, but it's the third largest city in the state. And, we have all these influences that represent different parts of the United States, and they're all right here in the state.
And again, we're going to welcome the booth with Darren Todd on KDX AM 1590, talking to Gary Figgins, publisher, editor, and founder of the Show Me Missouri, the travel magazine of Missouri, talking about his extensive role in advancing tourism and the state of Missouri. And, we haven't even really talked about one town that's not my favorite, but a lot of people like to go to. That's Branson.
Yeah, Branson. I mean, Branson's a huge draw. And Branson will always have its audience. And I think other towns have benefited from that. So I think Springfield's growth has definitely benefited from the attention, the visitors who go to Branson. And Branson, it kind of started. I remember going to Branson back in the late 1980s, and it was a little town, 3,200. That was in fact, that was kind of their marketing logo. They had their city limit sign, Branson population 32 something, whatever it was. And you go to Branson now, and it's a good sized city.
It's a whole different world, that's for sure.
It's a whole different world, and that was back in the days when you had it was before the 1992 60 Minutes interview, which really is what caused Branson to boom. Was you had local musicians who were there, and they had their theaters, and then 60 Minutes had its interview in 1992, and then some not retired musicians, performers, but some established performers, Andy Williams, the Osmond Brothers, Bobby Vinton, Roy Clark. Some of those guys came in, and they started their own theaters, and then people started following suit. And then you had a completely different type of look to Branson, because you had internationally known names who were performing at Branson. And it's kind of gone back down to the local performers again. So yeah, it changes. It's a cycle.
And again, we're on Welcome to the Booth with Darren Todd on KDX AM 1590, talking to Gary Figgins, Show Me Missouri, the travel magazine of Missouri, founder, editor, and publisher. And, thinking a little bit about that, it was almost like after that interview, it kind of established those performers having what they're called a residency, much like they do in Las Vegas. Hey, we're going to stay here. We're going to save on expenses. We're going to make all the people come to us at our facilities and not have to necessarily do the travel and things of that nature. And it kind of built, and you said it kind of ebbs and flows. And then obviously you have the amazing shows, you have the go-karts, you have all that other stuff, the water parks and things of that nature. And kind of switching gears, Gary, tell us a little bit about Show Me Missouri.
Yeah, well, let me build on something you just said there real quick. Yeah, we think of Branson, we think of the music, but you just point out one of the big things that's happened in Branson over the past 5, 6, 7 years, and that's the fact that they have identified the need to provide family entertainment. A family of 4 going to the theater. Your kids, I don't know about your kids, mine may have sat there and watched a comedy show, but a music show, they probably wouldn't have sat there very long. They may have lasted a little bit, but they would have grown tired of it before the show was over. A lot of companies have come in, and you had Silver Dollar City there. The Hershon brothers started that years and years ago, but you've had other companies come in with the GoTrack, the Trax family, go-kart tracks and boats and stuff like that. And you had the putt-putt golf now along the strip, and so they have really identified the need to address the family adventure, kind of that soft adventure for families. And they have there's a aquarium there on the strip. They used to be the side of one of the biggest theaters on the strip at one time, and now it's a beautiful aquarium. And so they've really found that need and started addressing that. And I think that's maybe it's with help of the city council, maybe it's in lieu of the city council, who knows, but it's by the city council. I don't know. Maybe it's a little bit of both.
And again, one thing that I've also noticed is, again, we're in Welcome to the Booth with Darren Todd on KDX AM 1590, talking to Gary Figgins, talking a little bit about Branson. I think they've done a good job. Also, they developed the landing. They've developed hey, we're a convention center. We want people to come in, have conventions. You can have the convention during the day, and at night, your family can do all these other activities, or they can do it while you're in the convention. It seems like they've almost kind of meshed business with entertainment to try to bring in the, how do you put it, the work vacation.
Yeah, you can have that business vacation and bring your family with you and do some things too. And the landing is a good example of that. It's a shopping complex that appeals to a wide variety of people. Is right there on the lake, but even that, they have zip lines there. You can zip across the lake, and there's a little patio area up at the top of the hill, and you can ride the gondola or whatever it is up there, and then zip back down to the landing. And they have their own shows, but they have the convention center there as well. And the train, there's Branson Scenic Railway is based there, so you can get on the train and take the train for, I think it's like a 30, 40-mile trip into the mountains, and come back and get in your car and go eat dinner.
And again, we're here on Welcome to the Booth with Darren Todd on KDX AM 1590, talking to Gary Figgins, the founder, editor, and publisher of the Show Me Missouri, the travel magazine in Missouri, talking a lot about travel and tourism in the state of Missouri. If you've never had a chance to talk to Gary about the state of Missouri, his knowledge is unsurpassed. As he indicated, he's been lobbying since 2000.
2000.
For the benefit of the travel and tourism. Been to Jefferson City numerous times, testified on numerous bills. Gary, let's talk a little bit about this magazine, the Show Me Missouri, the travel magazine in Missouri. I know it's probably one of the things that you're most proud of, other than, of course, your children, Lily and Matthew. Great kids. They're doing extremely well. You did a great job raising them. I have to give you that on the air. You've done a great job.
Oh, thanks.
Tell me a little bit about Show Me Missouri. It had to be a passion of love to get that thing up and running and going.
Yeah, it was. Like I said earlier, we spent about 2 years kind of investigating, talking to publishers in other states, and those guys were fantastic, offering advice, things to do, things not to do. You have to, the details that go into a publication like this that people don't understand. You have to find a font. What's going to be your standard font that you're going to use for text? Newspapers, it's usually Times Roman or something, but you have to find your font that's going to identify your magazine. And, those are types of things that take a whole lot of time to determine. When we started the magazine in 98, all magazines were published, the photos used slide film. That's what professional photographers used, especially scenic photographers, landscape photographers, use slides. So then you had to take a slide, and you didn't just, you didn't have the digital camera back then. You didn't even have film. You had film, but film cameras from a print, you could not scan a print to republish in a publication like this, a full color publication with a lot of detail. You had to use slides. So we would get the slides, then we had to ship the slides off and pay something like $100 a slide to just get it scanned. And then the slides would come back, the images would come back on disk, and then we could place the images. And, and then we got to where you had your own scanner, so you could kind of scan some things a little bit better. And then digital came up, and I remember the first digital camera I had was a 6 megapixel camera, and I thought, man, this is awesome. This is all you ever need. And we have, our phones now have 40 megapixel cameras on them now, but a whole lot of detail. But, those are the things that go into the publication that a lot of people did not understand or don't understand. And I didn't understand at that time, because working at the newspaper, we had our own dark room, and we were black and white. So you developed your film, and you made your prints, and you burned your plates and all that. So we first started printing in Memphis, and found a printer in downtown Memphis, and would take the magazine down to them, and they would burn the plates. I have to go down, and I'd have to do a proof on the proofing process, and then I have to go back down during the press run and do another proofing process, and then we moved to a printer in Paducah, and the same thing, a lot of traveling back and forth to the printer. And then we moved to this company in Fulton called Ovid Bell Press, and Ovid Bell was all digital, so we could upload the magazine to them. They had their own mail house, and so they would mail the publication out. And we still use that company. That company's actually been bought by Walsworth Publishing. And Walsworth is known for high school yearbooks and stuff like that, and they're based in Marceline. Fulton is one of their plants. They have plants everywhere now, but a lot of times the magazine mails now, and people who subscribe get it before we do down here. And it's a pretty amazing process. But all the proofing is done online. One of the things we have here in Kennett, and I know it's becoming more common in rural America, or rural Missouri right now, is the high-speed fiber internet. When we first started doing this, first went to Fulton for our publishing, uploading the magazine, it was about a 13, 14-hour process. So the magazine be ready, we'd convert all the files to the format needed. We start uploading because we had dial-up access, and then we had DSL access, and that sped up a little bit, but about 13 and a half hours to upload it. We can upload it now, the entire magazine, we upload in under 30 minutes.
That's amazing.
And I mean, that's how technology, and especially the high-speed internet, is affecting rural Missouri and rural parts of the country, is allowing us to do stuff like that.
And again, we're going to welcome the booth with Darren Todd, KDX AM 1590, talking to Gary Figgins, the founder, editor, publisher of Show Me Missouri, the travel magazine in Missouri. Gary, talking a little bit about those first two publications that you did for the Chambers back in Pemiscot and New Madrid County. Please tell me you kept a copy of each one of those.
I actually have a copy of them.
And have them hanging on your wall in your office.
Yep, they are. They're not hanging on the wall in the office, but I do have a copy of them, and they were you look at them now and you think, man, that was pretty elementary publication. But
and in talking about your first Show Me Missouri, the travel magazine in Missouri, do you have the first copy of that as well?
Yeah, and that one is framed and hanging in the office. And it was, in fact, when we printed that magazine, not knowing what we were expecting, I printed probably 13,000 magazines, I think. And we ended up getting 500 subscribers, and a few years later, I threw away something like 12,000 magazines.
Right.
But it was all a waste. But that first magazine was an effort, and it's one that I look at now and I think it took a whole lot of people, and I really do credit Jack Stapleton for getting that story from Gene Carnahan, because that was just such a big get, and it really helped solidify for the advertisers that there were connections in Southeast Missouri.
And again, we're on Welcome to the Booth with Darren Todd on KDX AM 1590, talking to Gary Figgins, the publisher, editor, and founder of the Show Me Missouri, the travel magazine in Missouri. Gary, in the event that someone wants to reach out and say, hey, I'd like to have a copy of this, I'd like to look at it, how would we go about doing that?
You can, we have a website. The website is showmemissouri.net, www.showmemissouri.net, all spelled out. And or you can call 573-888-1100 and subscribe over the phone. You can call and request a free sample copy, and we'll send you a sample copy, and confident that once you receive it that you'll send a subscription in. It's $15.99 a year for a 1-year subscription. We're a quarterly magazine, so the fall issue for 2025 just mailed, and so a lot of people should be getting that. And the cover on that, the cover feature on that, is an interview with a writer who used to write for us back in the early days, and she started kind of going through and documenting the history of old mills in Missouri, and published her first book late last year. And so we did I sat down, did an interview with her, and we visited some of the mills. I had visited many of the mills that she had been to, photographed them. And so we were able to use her story and some of my photos for this issue. And it was just it was a great way of getting back in touch with someone who was there in the early days.
And again, we're here on Welcome to the Booth with Darren Todd on KDX AM 1590, talking to Gary Figgins, the owner, editor, and publisher of the Show Me Missouri magazine. Again, if you're interested in getting a subscription, you can get on the website,
www.showmemissouri.net.
You can also call the phone number,
573-888-1100.
And we're talking about the quarterly published magazine, which is an amazing magazine. Talking about the current episode or issue in which they're talking about some of the meals, and I say that meals with my southern drawl of. Isn't that right, Mooring?
Well, we've had stories on meals too.
Yeah,
So.
Meals on Wheels or
Yeah,
Mills.
We've done that as well.
And I'm hoping that the Bollinger Mill is one that we talked about. Is that correct?
Bollinger is in there. Photo with Bollinger is there. In fact, I have been up. I have photographed Bollinger. There are two mills that I have photographed.
It's contagious.
Yeah, it's
Gary.
Contagious. I know. I have photographed in every season, and that's Alley Spring Mill over around Winona and Bollinger Mill up at Burfordville, north of Cape, and west of Jackson, closer west of Jackson. But those two mills are just they're both owned by the state parks, and several of the mills in Missouri are owned by state parks, and the Missouri state parks have done a fantastic job preserving those mills. A lot of them are staffed, so they'll do demonstrations with inside the mill. But there are a lot of privately owned mills too, where the owners have gone in and really kind of take it upon themselves to preserve that history. And a couple of them, Topaz Mill over in southwest Missouri, the guy who owns that land, you can drive up, and if he sees you out there, he'll go turn the mill on and make you some cornmeal or something.
That's amazing.
And they just find it that's their way. They have made it their duty to preserve that part of history. And these mills when these mills, you look at Burfordville, there's a little community that's around the mill. So some houses. There used to be a post office there, but that was where you went for your Saturday kind of get-togethers. Yeah, everything was centered around the mill. You either took your corn in, or you were getting something from the mill or taking something to the mill. But all these little things like the post office and the general store and things like that all developed and popped up around the mills, and that was kind of the center of the community.
And again, we're here on Welcome to the Booth with Darren Todd on KDX AM 1590, talking to Gary Figgins, the founder, publisher, and editor of Show Me Missouri, the travel magazine of Missouri. Gary, how do you decide what articles are going to make each issue?
We have a great staff of freelance writers, and those writers many of them have written for years and years. In fact, I have one writer who wrote for all but maybe the first two issues.
Okay.
We had one writer who's a columnist who had a column on the last page of the magazine and just kind of told about her childhood and growing up in Missouri and how it impacted her life and life lessons she learned. And unfortunately, she died around Christmas last year. So, but she had written for every magazine except for the very first issue.
Oh.
And but a lot of times the writers themselves submit the stories. Sometimes I'll assign a story. A good example of that is next year, 2026, Missouri will be one of the cities hosting the World Cup.
Right.
Soccer here in FIFA. I'm sorry, World Cup, and that's a big deal here in Missouri. And so Kansas City is going to be hosting, I think, 6 matches. It starts June 11th, middle of June. We'll run through the middle of July. But it was a bid that Kansas City put in several years ago, trying to bring this event in. And it's the first time that the FIFA World Cup has been hosted by 3 countries. Canada, the U.S., and Mexico went together to submit a bid. And Kansas City will host 6 of those matches, including, I believe, a quarterfinal. And, just for that one event in the summer, the Kansas City area is expecting 650,000 visitors.
Yes.
It's a huge amount. So I assigned a writer in Kansas City who's she has Southeast Missouri ties. She graduated from SEMO. She used to work for KFVS back in the early days, and her husband is a professional photographer, which is really handy because he can photograph. I don't have to search for photos when she submits stories because she submits her own photos through her husband. But he's also a photographer. He runs one of the cameras at Arrowhead Stadium and at Kauffman Stadium. He works for the NFL and Major League Baseball as contract photographer for them, running one of the TV cameras. So, but since they had those connections in Kansas City, I called her and said, we're going to start, I want to do a series on Missouri preparing for the World Cup. And so, starting with the summer issue, she had her first part of the series, and then the second part appears in the current issue, the fall issue that just mailed. But assigned that story to her. So, in the fall issue, her story is about how these small towns are preparing for this influx of visitors. You know, these people aren't just going to Kansas City and going to stay there.
Sure.
They're going to explore.
Absolutely.
And next year has the added bonus, and next year is also the 100th anniversary of Route 66. And we've already discussed the appeal of Route 66 to international visitors. There would be some of those people coming to the World Cup who'll say, hey, we're in Missouri. We might as well, we're in the U.S. We might as well follow Route 66. And they'll go to St. Louis and hopefully start there and make their way diagonally across the state to Joplin and probably go outside and even follow a major part of the route. But those people would be staying places. And the towns like Chillicothe and, Warrensburg, University of Central Missouri's there. These towns are having to be creative. They're going to have to be creative to be able to accommodate the visitors that they're going to have. Hotel rooms are going to be almost impossible to find. Don't go to Kansas City and expect to get a hotel somewhere people will, it's probably going to be a big business for Vrbo and Airbnb and
Absolutely.
people renting their houses out and a bedroom out or whatever, because these people are going to have to stay somewhere. And it's not just Kansas City. These teams, there would be teams a team may be based in St. Louis.
Right.
And do their practices in St. Louis, but they're playing in Los Angeles. And so they'll still be in the St. Louis area during the practice sessions and all that, and so they're going to experience the St. Louis culture.
And again, we're on Welcome to the Booth with Darren Todd on KDX AM 1590, talking to Gary Figgins, the editor, publisher, founder of Show Me Missouri, the travel magazine Missouri, talking a little bit about it. We indicated how you could get a subscription to the publication that's printed 4 times a year. Gary, is it always required that I would get an actual physical copy? A lot of people, I like the physical copy. I like it being mailed. Is there an option that we can just do it strictly being emailed or the digital copy only?
We do not do the digital copy. We went into this with the idea that a travel magazine is something that you have to hold in your hands. And I subscribe to a bunch of magazines, and I subscribe to some digital copies, and it's just some publications it's easier to just have it on your iPad, and I don't mind having it on my iPad. But Show Me Missouri is a publication that a lot of our readers have told us that when they finish, they put it on the coffee table, it becomes a coffee table piece, or they share it with a friend, and you can't do that with digital copies. And we made the decision early on that we would not do a digital version of it. I know a lot of newspapers are doing that now, and but a lot of them are doing it because they're forced to do it. And it's not really the same thing getting your news versus seeing something.
Right.
These photos, the photos in the magazine, seeing it in print is completely different than seeing it online.
I agree 100%.
Seeing a digital version of it.
And again, we're here with Gary Figgins, editor, publisher, founder of Show Me Missouri, the travel magazine in Missouri. On Welcome to the Booth with Darren Todd on KDX AM 1590. Gary, in the event that I wanted to advertise with you, is it possible that I could contact you the same way? How would I do that?
Do the same thing. You call that same number, and probably end up talking to me, and I'll handle the advertising. But most of our advertisers are they're called DMOs. They're designated marketing organizations. In Dunklin County, the Kennett Chamber of Commerce is the DMO for Dunklin County. Dexter is starting this year. Dexter is starting to advertise. They're going to be in 2 issues this year, and we're proud to have them. Cape Girardeau has been a long-time advertiser. New Madrid has been a long-time advertiser. Most of our advertisers go in all 4 issues, and they've been there multiple years. So it's just a matter of renewing their contracts. It's not we're always welcome. We always welcome new advertisers, but we've been very fortunate to have advertisers, cities and destinations and attractions that have seen the value in advertising with us and sticking with it, and just put us in their budget every year, and that's great to have that. But we never want to take it for granted either.
And again, we're on Welcome to the Booth with Darren Todd on KDX AM 1590. We've got a couple of minutes left talking to Gary Figgins, the founder, publisher, editor to Show Me Missouri, the travel magazine of Missouri. And real quickly, I've had an opportunity to interview some people, most specifically Patsy Rublin, also the director of the Stars and Stripes Museum, Laura Doomey. How do we go about making sure that individuals know about these outstanding museums in the area? And also, is there a way that we can help them get funded, in your opinion, through the state or the federal level?
There's funding available. A lot of funding for institutions like museums comes through the Missouri Arts Council. I'm sure there's funding elsewhere, but you bring up a great point. I mean, we depend on people calling us and telling us about things like that, and if we find it interesting, and most of the time we will, it's just a matter of getting it scheduled to send a writer there. But Stars and Stripes, Stars and Stripes Museum, there are people in Southeast Missouri who don't realize that place is up there, and it's a phenomenal museum. I visited. We did a story on the museum years ago. It's gone through all kinds of changes since we did it. Since we did the story, it's time to do a revisit that. But you have the National Cemetery next to it, and it's just an ideal location. They had the big event in September, Freedom Days.
That is correct. They just talked about that. They're having it in Cape Girardeau. Yeah. It's an outstanding event.
Yeah, but they have an event there on the grounds too. They bring in reenactors, and you can go through the museum. And I went up there several years ago and photographed that. And it's just the time that goes into it. But, to think that the most well-known, one of the longest-running publications, military publication, Stars and Stripes newspaper, was started in Stoddard County.
Absolutely.
During the Civil War. Troops came in and took over the newspaper and decided they were going to print a newspaper, and that became the newspaper for the military.
And they have one of only 3 original copies of the first newspaper at their facility, and you can look at it.
Yeah, you can look at it. It's right there on display, and you can see it and think, what a fantastic treasure to have in Southeast Missouri. And I know they have a group there that's trying to promote that and trying to make it more of a regional attraction. And good luck to them, because it deserves every bit of accolades it receives.
And again, here we're on Welcome to the Booth with Darren Todd on KDX AM 1590, and we're winding down with Gary Figgins, editor, founder, and publisher of the Show Me Missouri, the travel magazine of Missouri. I would first of all like to thank Gary very much for his time. Is there anything that you would like to leave the listeners before we sign off today, Gary?
Hey, next year, 2026 is going to be a big year of anniversaries. It's the 250th anniversary of the United States. It's the 250th birthday of the United States. But we mentioned the World Cup. We mentioned the 100th birthday of Route 66. Yeah, you can plan your vacation, and I certainly am not saying don't leave the state of Missouri. We're getting ready to take a road trip. In fact, my wife and I are getting ready to take a road trip on Route 66 all the way to California in a couple of weeks. And so I don't intend to tell you don't have to leave the state of Missouri, but make sure you spend some time in Missouri and see what we have. Just in this area, Elephant Rock, and that's a fantastic state park that, again, a lot of people don't know it's there, but man, it's just so beautiful. The Current River and the areas there, the Johnson Shut-ins, and we mentioned Alley Spring, and Southeast Missouri itself has some great places. We can boast having the lowest elevation in the state and the highest elevation in the state, and it's all within a 2-hour drive.
And again, we're here. Welcome to the booth with Darren Todd on KDX AM 1590, winding down with Gary Figgins. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have not got a subscription to Show Me Missouri, the travel magazine of Missouri, you have to get one. Contact Gary at the phone number, which is
573-888-1100.
Or contact him on the website.
Show me www.showmemissouri.net.
I promise you will not be disappointed. If you are, I will refund your $15.99 for any subscription, but I assume you will not be disappointed. And on behalf of my executive producer, Evan Todd, and my producer, Maureen Johnson, I'd like to thank you for making Welcome to the Booth with Darren Todd part of your day. I hope you have a great afternoon and a better tomorrow.